We're going to transition now to our panel of practitioners. So this panel will be moderated by Anya Marchenko, who is a senior associate at SIGA. She helps to coordinate our Targeting Aid Better program. And so Anya, why don't you go ahead and introduce our panelists?
Sure, thank you so much, Carson. And I'm excited to see our panelists here. We are so delighted to have three esteemed panelists here with us today who are working in governments and NGOs to talk about how their organizations actually deliver aid, think about targeting, and engage with researchers. So we're hoping this to be kind of the other side of the coin, a really nice complement to some of the researcher-focused talks that we had earlier in the day. So Dr. Miriam Laker is the research director at GiveDirectly. She is a medical doctor and a clinical researcher with more than a decade's experience working in academia and the nonprofit sector. In nonprofits, she works with a large community health NGO, and in academia, she teaches the clinical epidemiology course at UCSF and a course at Makerere. Dr. Laker has a master's in advanced studies with a focus on epidemiology, biostats, and a postgrad diploma in project planning. And just for fun, she's a co-founder of AWISH, which is a hub for African women in science. She's an author of children's books and was named one of Uganda's top 40 women under 40. Sam Carter, our next panelist, is a research manager at Precision Development, or PXD. At PXD, she helps use the findings of randomized controlled trials to help farmers around the world improve their livelihood. Prior to her work at PXD, Sam has worked at an impressive array of research, development, and effective altruist organizations, including roles at JPAL, the World Bank, and Founders Pledge, where she helped launch a fund that is focused on supporting high-impact global development organizations and providing strategic philanthropy advice to entrepreneurs. She holds a BA in economics and international studies and an MA in international economics from Johns Hopkins University. And Juan Martín Dusan Lopez is an advisor in the Colombian government. He works for the Prosperidad Social program in Colombia, where he helps design and implement Colombia's social welfare programs. Prosperidad Social is Colombia's national entity that is in charge of alleviating poverty. Juan holds a degree from the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, and he has studied abroad at Harvard and LSE and holds an MBA as well. We're really grateful that Juan was able to join this panel as of 1 hour ago when he stepped in for a colleague who had a last-minute urgent conflict. As we saw with Minister Lawson, policymakers are dealing with a lot of really important decisions right now, so we'll go easy on our new panelists. Just to start, I would like to ask the panelists, can you tell us what your organization does in about 5 minutes? So if you can summarize the mission of your organization, what aid you're delivering, and what your targeting problem is. And maybe let's start with Dr. Laker.
Yeah, and hi everybody. It's great to be part of this panel today. So I'm here representing GiveDirectly. I'm the research director at GiveDirectly. So GiveDirectly is a non-profit international NGO working in 10 countries in the world right now, mostly in Africa, but also in the US and the Bahamas. And the primary thing we do is we give cash directly to people living in poverty. And this cash is completely unconditional, meaning there's no strings attached. And we allow recipients to make their decisions for what they want to use this cash for. In other words, we let recipients determine what their outcomes that are important for them are. So since 2011, GiveDirectly has been able to raise funds up to $750 million, which has been given to date over 1 million recipients in all the countries that we work in. Another thing that is interesting about GiveDirectly is that we have over 300 employees, and out of those, 95% are based in the countries where we primarily work. So most of them are from Africa. And then also we do research, and that's why I'm the research director working there. We have, since GiveDirectly started, done 15 randomized control trials, Some have concluded, some are still ongoing, and there are more in the pipeline. So those are the key things that we do at Give Directly. The biggest targeting challenge that we have has really been repeated by all the previous speakers in all the different sessions. So we've all heard over and over again, targeting is not perfect. And so for Give Directly, we generally target communities. And when we're targeting communities, we use what governments give us as their measure for poverty. So we either use census data, universal basic registries, and as most of us know, these are usually outdated. They're very old, outdated. And so we struggle with that. And then we know that repeating these different forms of targeting is really expensive. And so then we have to balance, should we spend time targeting or should we use the money and give it to our recipients? In a few occasions where we've had to do individual targeting, the problem becomes another layer deeper, because then we have to deal with identifying the community and then go one level lower to identifying the individual. So those are the problems that we are struggling with as far as targeting. And just one thing, Anya, I noticed a number of people say my videos are freezing. We have a lot of cloud cover this evening, so I think that's the reason why, but I hope you've been able to hear me.
Yeah, thanks so much. We can hear you. And we hope that your video will come back online. Sam, would you like to go next?
Sure, yeah, I can go ahead and get started. I do have some slides that I might flip through very quickly, if that's all right.
All right, sounds great.
Okay, here we are. So I'm Sam Carter. I am a research and operations manager at Precision Development, as Anya mentioned, or PXD for short. We are a global nonprofit organization that harnesses technology, data science, and behavioral economics to empower people living in poverty to improve their lives. And we think that by providing actionable information to the right people in the right way and at the right time, we can empower people to improve their livelihoods, mitigate risks, and advance environmental sustainability. In practice, what we do is to provide targeted advice, and a majority of PXD's services deliver customized digital agricultural advice to smallholder farmers via their mobile phones. And we combine information on farmers and the circumstances in which they're farming with real-time data on things like weather, market prices, and other agriculture relevant information to generate tailored information on topics like pest management, input utilization, and environmental stewardship. And we deliver this information via mobile phones, which enables us to reach users at a very large scale. So working with partner organizations, including governments and NGOs and multilaterals, we currently reach 5.2 million users in 10 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And you can see from this slide that the precise details of each service varies based on the regulatory environment, the information needs of the target population, as well as the digital culture in each context. So in India, for example, we send outbound voice calls, as well as access to an inbound hotline. In Kenya, we operate a two-way SMS service in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries, and Irrigation. And we also leverage technology to address information poverty in sectors beyond agriculture, which includes education, nutrition, and other sectors that advance well-being. We target a number of different information frictions that can be addressed through digital information provision and other technology-enabled services. And we do all this because we have empirical evidence that this model of digital information provision can change user behavior and can actually can improve lives as well. So we've got a couple of statistics on the screen. One meta-analysis of 7 studies in sub-Saharan Africa and India found that digital agriculture programs have been associated with a 4% average increase in agricultural yields. And given that providing these services is extremely cheap, especially in terms of the marginal cost of adding farmers to existing services, this is also a highly cost-effective model. There are estimates suggesting that PXD's benefit cost ratio may be as high as 10 to 1, and we've seen that our cost per farmer has fallen by more than 90% since PXD was founded in 2016. So currently our service costs less than $2 per farmer per year, and we expect our cost effectiveness to continue to improve through both improved scale and improved impact. And that improvement in impact comes through a lot of work we do to continuously experiment, iterate, and gather impact evidence that can improve our service delivery. So we gather information at each step in our theory of change to improve engagement with our service, improve the knowledge that is transferred through our service, improve adoption of the recommendations that we're sharing with farmers, as well as to ultimately improve the outcomes that are generated through all of that work. We analyze a lot of different data. We do a lot of different types of research. In 2020, we completed 10 randomized experiments and launched 20 more. And we use the findings from these evaluations to improve our programs, as well as generate new hypotheses for further exploration. We also are able to do this research at a pretty large scale. So in the state of Odisha, in India, for example, we're conducting an impact evaluation with a sample of 15,000 farmers, and that involves collecting plot boundary data that we can use to generate low-cost estimates of our impacts on productivity through remote sensing and satellite imagery. So it's been really exciting to hear about some more of that work throughout the day today. And then we also, of course, leverage insights from existing literature to ensure that we're delivering the most impactful version of our service. And as I've mentioned, just to get at the targeting question, targeting and customization are sort of key aspects of what makes PXD's model unique. So we deliver advice that is tailored to the user. And by delivering advice via all phones, not just smartphones, we ensure that our service is able to reach those who may not have access to information very easily. We also think about ways to expand our reach even beyond the owners of the phone. So we've been exploring ways to encourage people to listen to the advice on speakerphone within their household, which might expand access to the information to others who might not be the owners of the phone. And we also are always trying to look for ways to improve our customization as well, which we think of as another key part of the targeting work that we do. So in addition to targeting the people who need information most, also customizing to make sure that we're giving the right people the right information. So we have an in-house tech platform, which has been deployed in 7 of our geographies and will eventually be used for all of our program delivery, was designed to facilitate customization and low-cost research. So we're always looking for partnerships with organizations that can help us get more data that can be used to reach more farmers or to improve our customization, as well as experts on sort of customization and machine learning that we can partner with. So I will stop there for now. And
thank you so much, Sam. Juan, you're up.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you. Our director, Edgar, was so sorry for can't be with you today, but well, I think I can be helpful for this panel. So I work in Prosperidad Social, or in English, the Department for Social Prosperity of Colombia. We are like the social arm of the national government. We are in charge of designing, coordinating, and implementing public policies for overcoming of poverty and social equity. If you don't know, Colombia have a lot of inequity, so it's one of our target to work to change that for our country. And I am advisor special in the money transfer direction. So in the money transfer direction, we help people, we help households with money transfer to help them for the poverty trap, because they are poor, or they are extreme poor, so they can have the opportunities of the access to change that. So in the money transfer, we help them for just some help for them to can change that. What is our targeting problem? As you know, the COVID was very difficult for us, well, for all the countries, but for Colombia was very difficult for 2 things in particular. The first one, we have a lot of informality. So it's people that they don't have formal jobs, so they just look the money in the streets. So they every day they look how can they earn money. for their family. And when we have the quarantines, they can go outside, they can go to look for money. So that thing just make worse the thing of poverty. And we have now in Colombia a problem also with the migration, with Venezuela. So we have a difficult to look for them, for the migration. And with the poor people, they just start to move because a lot of them, they can living in the same place. So they move to another cities, they move to another apartments or houses or with families. So they become a new household. So we have in Colombia a social register called SISBEN that we have a previously one that is called SISBEN 3, and we are making up the update with the SISBEN 4. But we can find the most of the people with the SISBEN, but when they start to move or they change their mobile phones or they change the way that we can contact them, so that was the difficult for targeting them, and that's why we can find them all. I want to clarify also that our programs go for the 60% of households in Colombia. That is like 9.5 million households in Colombia. So of course, it's a very large program and it's very difficult to get to the single one of the households.
Thanks so much, Juan. You really set up a nice segue to kind of the next thing that I'm really curious about, which is that I know that many organizations, as you described, had to pivot to a different kind of operation because of COVID. So maybe, like you said, people start to migrate. Maybe you can't send out a field team, so you can't find people in the same way that you had to before. I know that, some people really pivoted to a digital method of cash transfers, similar to the government of Togo. And so maybe let's start with you, Juan. I'm curious, what were those changes that you had to implement to benefit, to still reach all of those people? What were some of the successes that you had in transitioning during COVID? And maybe one of the challenges that you had that you still, are trying to figure out. And so we'll start with you and maybe go on to Miriam after that.
Okay, thank you. Well, the program, the biggest program that is Solidarity, this Ingreso Solidario, is for 3 million households. It was very difficult because it started with the pandemic. So it was like, okay, we have to make something to help all these people that they can have earnings. So that was very difficult. We have the SISBEN, that was the social register I told you, but we start to see that need an upgrade, an actualization is better to say, and we migrate to SISBEN 4. So we can say that today our benefits, our households benefits, are the 80% come from SISBEN 4. So,
and SISBEN is that like a census or a survey database, or can you just define SISBEN?
Yeah, SISBEN is a register that comes like two forms. It's a survey, but it's not only like they answer question and it's all. No, the people go for the home, they make question to the family, but also they look the conditions about the house, the hood they live, how many people are in the family, because it's not the same if you're one or if you live with 8 or 9 people. So it's not only survey, but it's like yes, it's
observation
a survey
of people's conditions,
but with a research of the condition. So we accelerate in the government to the SISBEN 4. So the 80% of the households in Ingreso Solidario are from Sysbin 4, but also we have different data from other part, because all the people here are not in this, because Colombia has some jungle or rural fields that is not easy to get, so we can't find everything, and we can go to all the country, but we can find it for all another places like victims of the conflict. So we can get benefits, we can get households also from different programs of the government, from different data, and that was very difficult, but we have a lot of improve in the different months. Also, we are, since pandemic, in this government, we are also near from $7 billion of cash transfer to these people, to these families in Colombia. So I think it's a good goal. Another thing is that the people in Colombia also look better, they know better that our people and our family that are in condition of poor and an extreme poor that need help. And also we can have a new law in the Congress of Colombia that just extend the money and the date of Ingreso Solidario. Ingreso Solidario is only for this year. Well, it starts for 3 months, but we are already like 1.5 years. But in the Congress, they approved that Ingreso Solidario is going to be till December of the next year. And also they approved to have 1 million more households or families to this program. So I think
will these cash transfers,
sorry.
so have these cash transfers were distributed via mobile money, or it sounds like a lot of operations in Colombia kind of remained in person, where people were actually traveling to households and doing surveys and observing? Were the cash transfers similarly, in person, or did you have to transfer to a mobile money or online banking type of situation? And then we'll have to move on to the next panels right after this.
Okay, we have the two of them. We have one we call bancarizados, or they are in the financial system. So we can transfer them maybe if they have bank accounts, or maybe if they have mobile application, because this is like a boom in Colombia in the poor families, because they don't have charges for use the service. But also we have some other that is called Giro postal transfer, that we have alliances. Well, we contract some operator that they send the money to the nearly town, and they go to that office and have their money. Of course, they don't have an office in the 100% of the territory of Colombia, but they have offices in the 100% of cities of Colombia. So they help a lot to get to those people who live far from the main cities.
Gotcha. Yeah, so a mixture of both. Yeah. Miriam, I'm curious for you to tell us kind of GiveDirectly's COVID story, and what are some of the successes and some of the challenges that GiveDirectly encountered?
Great, thank you very much. It's been very interesting to one. So before COVID came, GiveDirectly was at a rather steady state. We knew the method of targeting we're using. So while we give cash directly through mobile phones predominantly, or some kind of technology, the way we were targeting and enrollment was in person. So we had our teams go out into the fields, working by ourselves, identify the people that needed the cash, and then did the cash transfers for them. And we did things like geographical saturation, where once we identified a poor community, everyone in that community received cash. Or we used various methods of household targeting, and one of the quirks that we used was using the roofing of different houses. And I think Michael Walker and Ted talked about that, where we found 30 to 40% of the houses in poor communities had grass thatched houses, and in Uganda this was even higher. And then we also used demographic saturation. So this happened when we had partners who were interested in a specific demographic, like let's say if they were interested in maternal and child nutrition, then we went to communities and still saturated the whole of that demographic. And then, so everything was steady state, and then came COVID. And so then we realized that one, there's urgency, and we don't have the luxury of the time that we usually have, the urgency. But two, COVID is contagious. It's an infectious disease, so we could not have our teams out there. And then three, we could not on our own identify all the communities that needed our services. And so in a way to combat that, we began to think of more unconventional methods. And we've had Josh, the minister from Togo, and Emily talk about what we did with the team. So we began to use unconventional means like cell phone data, big data really, cell phone data to try and identify first individuals, but then communities that were that needed this cash. But then also we used geographical satellite targeting. So those are the new areas where we've started going. Very interesting, but lots of challenges still in there. Then the other thing that we did was to begin to work with community-based organizations. So like I said, prior to that, Give Directly went out into the community where the government had listed as poor based on like census data, and then we enrolled people. But during the COVID period, we realized it was worthwhile working with community organizations because they knew these communities, they knew who needed this targeting. And so we began to work with them as well. And then you asked about the challenges. What are the challenges that are still there? First of all, the challenge is we still don't know what the optimal targeting method is. Is there a magic bullet? We don't know. Is there a way to combine all the different methods and in a way that they will fill in all the gaps the different methods have? We don't know. That still needs to be studied. But then for the using the cell phone big data, one of the things that we are struggling with is when should we use individual targeting, and when should we use saturated cell phone towers? So that should we use one method in the urban setting, one in the rural setting? Should we combine them? We're still at the point where we're not very certain about that. The other issue is that in the rural areas, there tends to be low cell phone coverage. So even if with the Give Directly method, normally we do what we call a SIM drive. We get the telecom companies to encourage people to register on mobile and them. That cell phone coverage in those areas. And so although teletargeting is working really well, some places or cell phone. And then also finally, like teletargeting, are we actually targeting the poorest of the poor? Because is it possible that the people that don't have access to cell phone coverage are the poorer people that we need to be targeting? So those are the things that we are still struggling to understand while we begin to live in this new normal with the new methods that we've started using, but we still know that there are lots of gaps that we need to address.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. I have a follow-up question to your answer, and then I'd like to move on to Sam to share. So it sounds like you had a lot of changes in Give Directly that took place, whether you mentioned big data or using, involving more community groups who have better information about people who are living in the areas that you're trying to distribute cash. Has any of the things that you had to rethink because of COVID actually made you rethink other things that maybe weren't touched by COVID, but you were like, oh, well, now that we're doing this part differently, like, shouldn't we also go look over here and see whether or not, we should rethink that? I'm wondering kind of how the spirit of innovation sort of spread, so to speak.
Right, that's interesting. So one of the main areas where we've had to change the way we work is not really in targeting, but in our operations. So we normally had about 3 touch points with the recipients before they finally received their cash. And we've realized that we don't have to have 3 touch points. For a number of them, we now just do 1 touch point enrollment. And then in areas we found that we can actually do all this over the phone. We don't actually have to get in touch with these people in person. So those are some of the things that we've learned, and there's no way we are going back to the way we used to do things before, because it's also more efficient and it is faster and for us and for the recipients. So we're not going back to the way things used to be.
That's great. Yeah, I suppose crises have a way of really making you face what's really necessary and what's not. Sam, yeah, so I'm really curious about how PXD adapted during COVID. You know, it seems to a naive observer that you're already delivering information to farmers via mobile phone. It's already kind of remote. So I'm sure absolutely nothing broke down and everything was perfect in your organization during COVID. But would you like to would you like to elaborate on that?
Sure. Thank you, Anya. And I will add a little bit of nuance. I don't think everything stayed perfect. It is true that because our intervention and our service is delivered digitally, it was our work reaching the beneficiaries whom we serve was largely remote when the rest of the world went remote. So we were able to continue providing advice and continue reaching the farmers that we were already serving. And we actually were able to expand our presence in the world quite dramatically since March of 2020, which is when we as an organization all went remote. We've actually added 1.6 million users, and that's largely through, and as both of my co-panelists have identified, the importance of working with partners. So we've worked with a large multilateral, IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, to launch a new intervention in Pakistan, Kenya, and Nigeria during COVID. And our work in Nigeria was brand new. We recruited a team of staff in Nigeria, activated, collected information on, and sort of started sending advisory to over 100,000 farmers in Nigeria, all remotely. So no one from PXD globally has met our colleagues in Nigeria yet, but we're serving over 100,000 farmers there now. And that includes in areas that are conflict affected. And I think that's one of the key lessons we've taken away from this transition, is that really understanding that we can reach people even if we can't go meet them physically. So we can reach people in places where there might be human security challenges. We can reach people in places where there might be climate related or weather related disasters. We can still provide them with advice that is useful. I just wanted to pick up on actually something that came up during Juan's remarks also, which is that we've also learned that there is still quite a bit of importance in actually being able to meet people in person. So this point about collecting observational data and combining it with information you can get through a household survey or a phone survey is really important. And it's something that we've seen be important in understanding the users that we're serving, especially as we think about reaching new geographies, new contexts, new populations, or delivering sort of new versions of our service. And also important for if we're trying to think about using some of these more technical approaches like machine learning, remote sensing, we really want to have ground truth data that we can use to validate the information we're collecting remotely. So I just thought that was a very a key point to raise as well.
Yeah, it seems like there's been a lot of discussion about, is ground truth data the best that we have, and how fast does it expire, and how good are the alternatives? That seems to be a key theme of E2A today. Sam, I have just a follow-up question for you. So I'm wondering to what extent the need has increased among the farmers that you serve as a result of COVID, and whether or not that's really stressed the organization. So I can either see, well, I'm a farmer, I'm not super impacted because I'm going to grow whatever I'm going to grow anyway. Or I can see farmers being really vulnerable because maybe they don't have access to the supply chains that they would otherwise. So I'm wondering whether or not you saw like a real uptick in need and vulnerability amongst the population that you serve during COVID.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one that we as an organization were conscious of from the very beginning. So we rolled out a series of surveys where we collected multiple waves of data in a couple of different settings to understand how users of our service were responding to the pandemic, how they were feeling, what they were worried about. And I think our director of communications can share our dashboard and a couple blog posts about what we learned. But we basically wanted to keep in touch with what the most pressing issues were and how they were evolving. So we ended up, sending some information about market prices, because we learned that people were not they needed more information about what was going on in the markets where they were working. And there's some really nice and interesting evolution in terms of what was concerning to farmers from the very beginning of the pandemic, when it seemed like they were quite worried about themselves or their family members getting sick, to later on in the pandemic where there were more concerns, as you were raising, about income and especially other income generating activities not being available. So that was one thing we did. We also did surveys that were complementary with like agro dealers and other complementary actors in the agricultural ecosystem to understand how farmers were experiencing the pandemic differently from others in their communities, and also what barriers farmers themselves might not be aware of, but that the other actors in their communities might be facing. So definitely something that we wanted to keep in mind. And yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah, so in the remaining 20 minutes of the panel, I'd like to touch on two big themes. So the first theme, which is for anybody who wants to jump in, Juan, Miriam, or Sam, if you have a thought, I'd like to hear from all of you, of course, is how do you want to be working with the research community? So, we've heard from so many researchers right now, so many are on this call, and I think it'd just be great to have you talk about what you wish the research community was doing or not doing that would help your organization.
I can definitely go fast. So two things. One of them is I've been given directive for about 6 months now, and one of the things that I've been reading about across the different organizations that provide aid, whether cash aid or home aid, is everyone is talking about how difficult targeting is. But I feel like we're working in silos. And my hope is that we could get to a point where we work together as a team to try and sort out different issues that we are all facing with targeting, because it's the same problem that is going on. So that is one thing. The second thing that I wish organizations could start focusing more on is recipient success. Because one thing I notice over and over is we tend to decide for recipients, so the programming is based around what we need for the organizations rather than what recipients actually want. And so one of the things that I hope that we can begin to work on as organizations to provide aid is to find out from the recipients, what do you want? When do you want to receive it? In the case of cash, when do you receive what are the outcomes that matter to you? So for me, those are the two key things that I think we should be working on as organizations.
Yeah, Miriam, may I suggest that it's a little bit hard to hear you because of the internet. Maybe turn off your video so that it's easier for the connection so that we can hear you. I'm sorry to say that, but I think it might help us understand you a little bit better. So it seems like you, your second response was, more work on talking to the recipients to find out what they would prefer in terms of the timing of the transfers, the kind of help that they would want. And then can you just repeat the first response, because I think it cut out, so it would help the others understand your first point a little bit better.
Absolutely. So Enya, you got my second point correctly, more involving recipients in programming, to like really giving them agency. My first point was about, we all talk about targeting, we all talk about how difficult targeting is. I find that many organizations are working in silos to sort out the problems with targeting. And my wish is for a time when many of the organizations that are being bothered by the different forms of targeting could work together. So instead of working in the silos we normally work together to try and solve the problems that we are facing with targeting.
Yeah, got it. Thank you so much. Yeah. Juan, do you have kind of an answer, or what are your thoughts on what ways the Colombian government would want to be working with researchers and how researchers can help?
Yes, well, I think the research can help in many ways to the government, but for the cash transfer, I think we can see also 2 points. The first one is the impact. We know the macro impact. We know that if it wasn't for the cash transfer in Colombia, the poverty could be 1.5% percentage points more than today. So we know the macro data, but we don't know the impact in the micro, in the households, in the families. There are some studies that they came up, but of course, the most studies that we can have, it could be for us to improve our programs. And the second point is for strategies. Of course, Colombia is very different. All the regions is so the diversity of the culture inside the country is not easy for us to be just in Bogota, like leading and deciding for all the country, and maybe with other experiences and maybe research from the researchers that are here. Maybe they can help us with new strategies that we can make come true for help the families or the families of our programs.
Yeah, it sounds like you're interested in an impact evaluation of your activities. Yeah.
Of course.
Sam, that's great to hear. Probably music to a lot of people's ears here. Sam, what do you wish the research community was doing or not doing?
Yeah, so I think PXD is obviously quite connected to the research community. Our founding was sort of born out of randomized control trials finding that our approach is effective at improving lives. But some of the things that we're really excited about these days are topics like remote sensing and using satellite imagery and using sort of machine learning and non-traditional data sources to improve our customization and better measure the outcomes that we care about. So we really care about adoption of our recommendations, but we care about that because we think they improve lives. And so we want to be sort of tackling that question from two sides. One is identifying really impactful interventions that we could be improving the take-up of or the impacts of that are maybe tested at a smaller scale or through RCTs that are highly controlled or tested in one particular context, and using PADS or PXD's really large platform and 5 million users to test ways that we can actually improve the access to those effective interventions at a larger scale. So we're excited about working with people who have really good ideas, really effective ideas, and helping them reach more people by adapting them to a digital enabled or a digital supported version. The other side of things is that we are really interested in sort of thinking about how we can, sorry, I actually lost my train of thought here. I got so excited about this first point. The second point is really just about collaborating on actually bringing in expertise that we don't have in-house or where we might not have enough of it in-house, just in terms of the time within a day, to use large-scale data, use the evidence that we're collecting to improve our customization and targeting. And we think that this is important both for our own programming, but also for what we can share with the broader research and implementer community. We don't ever want to be conducting research that lives within PXD. We want to really be using it to improve our services and also helping others apply it. So we try to share that on our website. We have a registry of the experiments we've conducted, and we're always happy to talk with people about what we're learning and how it might be complementary to what they're learning as well.
Great, thank you. I see we have a question from the audience just related to some of the topics that we've just touched on for Miriam. You mentioned that Give Directly has expanded its targeting strategy from mostly relying on government-sourced info to also including community organizations to help reach households. And so Christina is wondering, how did you decide which organizations to partner with? And what do those relationships with the organizations look like?
Thank you, Christina. So a specific example that I'll give is the work that we did in providing COVID relief in Malawi. So in Malawi, we worked with the community-based organizations to help us target families that were in need, because once again, they know these families well. So they helped us target these families for the aid. So some of the criteria we use for choosing the CBOs is one, are they in the area where we're going to provide aid? That is very helpful. And how involved are they in the community? The relationship with these with community-based organizations has been a learning curve for us as well, because like I said previously, we used to go to the communities ourselves and are not helped by community-based organizations. So we also had to train their staff to do things the way we did, to help us with the enrollment, to help us with the targeting. So there was a bit of training that was involved, but we also had to learn the way these organizations work. It wasn't a one-way road. And so those are some of the things that were involved in it. So this is a very new type of relationship that we are building. It's a learning process, and we will have more information as we go down the road on how these relationships are actually going. So that's an example.
Thanks so much, Miriam. And the rest of the audience, feel free to add questions for the panelists in the Q&A box, and I will read them out if there's time. Yeah, so next I'm curious about what is your current big problem or need as an organization? So kind of looking forward, and how can the others in the room potentially help you with that big problem? And maybe we can start with Juan.
Of course. I don't know if the question before is for Miriam, but I don't know if you want me to answer as well.
Yeah, I think I'd love your thoughts on what kind of the big issue that you're facing in the future now as Prosperidad Social.
Okay. Well, our big problem, we're now stabilizing our programs. As I told you, we are starting the pandemic, so it was very difficult to start a program, to improve that program. So we are now like stabilizing our operation and our delivery for the household. So in the our problem now is to find those families that we can find, and to know if we actually are getting to the families that we have to. So we don't know if they are some poor or extreme poor families that we don't know that they exist. So that is our biggest problem now, to know if they can find the families that we have in our data, but they don't have their cash transfer because we don't have the number or their address today. And the other is that if we are not finding those families that we have to find, that are our biggest problem. And how we can solve, I think, is similar to my last answer, that with this community to find the strategies or to find the impact that we are having to those families, I think that could help to improve our problem.
Yeah, and SIGA affiliate Juliana Londoño Velez has also been working with the Colombian government on RCTs for this matter. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities for synergies there. And Juan, I'm curious, so in order to find the families that you want to know the impact of the cash on, or even deliver the cash in the first place, what is the capacity gap there? So is it like what is the biggest hurdle in finding those families? What prevents you from doing so?
Well, the first one and the most important is if they don't know they exist. So as I told you, we have a migration issue now in Colombia. So there's a lot of migrants that need the help, but the border from Colombia and Venezuela was closed for many months. They opened like the past week, but there are a lot of people that they go for, we call trochas, that is like a way in the jungle or in the river. So we don't have the information, or our formal information, and we don't know what's the name, where are they. So that's one of the problem. The second one is there's still some territories that is difficult to go because of you have to pass river, mountains, jungle. are in other territories still violent. So it's difficult to get to all those families. And the last one is they move a lot. So they are here now. If they found job in the other side of the country, they go and they change their numbers, they change their address. So it's very difficult because in most of the time they don't want us to know where they are, because they see the government not like an ally. They sometimes see the government, no, they want taxes, they want to look after my moves and do me something that I don't want. So that is some of our biggest problem to know those families.
Right. Yeah, and it sounds like you know, a lot of the problems that Colombia is facing in trying to find these people are very analogous. Like, they're not unique to a lot of the issues that development practitioners are facing all over the world. And especially as with climate change, migration starts to increase and various crises also induce migration, we're going to need new tools to figure out how to track refugees, migrants, displaced populations, much better than we currently do. So this seems like an issue that, it's not just Colombia that needs to solve it. It's also kind of the rest of us who are dealing with the same problem. Yeah, thank you for that, Juan. Miriam, I'm curious, what is GiveDirectly's big problem looking forward? What do you foresee in the future, and maybe how can the others in the room help you?
Okay, great, thank you. So our big problem always is money. we want to reach everyone living in poverty, and we want to have enough money to do that. But also we want to use evidence-based methods to identify these people that the people that are living in poverty. And for us to be able to do that, we need money to fund these different projects. But the other thing, getting away from the money, I think one of the big things, and I think this is something we cannot do by ourselves as GiveDirectly and need the other people to help us with, is how do we combine the different methods of targeting with their different trade-offs into one optimal overall approach that could help us reach everyone living in poverty. So that is the question, and I think it is the million-dollar question. If we can solve that, then I think this is not going to help just us as GiveDirectly, but all the other organizations that provide aid.
That's right. And to your point, it seems like a lot of the presentations during this conference have been about evaluating a specific targeting mechanism. And for sure, more work is needed on how we can combine those, into an overall approach. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sam, same question at you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Anya. So I think one of the big things that we have sort of touched on, but in addition to this supplementary technical expertise that we are always looking for on things like machine learning and remote sensing, one thing that we're really excited about exploring is partnering with organizations that have access to administrative data on the outcomes that we care about, like sales or productivity or revenue or profits for the beneficiaries of our service. So anyone who has contacts with or access to this type of information, please do feel free to reach out to us. Some examples, just to make it a little bit more concrete. We have worked in the past with other NGOs like One Acre Fund in Kenya and Rwanda to look at how sales and also input purchases within their stores are associated with access to our advisory service. We're working in Kenya with dairy cooperatives, which we consider to be a private sector partnership where we're actually able to get access to data on the daily sales that people are making of the milk that they're producing. Again, we can then link that up with data we have on who's received our advice. And then of course, working with government partners as well, especially when they have access to data on the use of subsidies or purchases from government supported shops or something like that. We're quite interested in easy and cheap access to data that already exists on take up or outcomes that we care about improving. So that's the one I would say. And then of course, funding is always, as an NGO, something on our minds.
Yeah, absolutely. In the remaining 3 minutes that we have, I'd just like to do one wrap up lightning round. And so we'll go Juan, Miriam, Sam one more time. And in 1 minute or less, tell us something that you think your organization does really well that you think other aid delivering organizations can learn from. Juan, up to you. Or do you want 1 more second to think about it?
I don't know. It's very different because we are talking about a government of a country. It's like Miriam said they have problems of money. We don't have in this program those problems. In other things we have that problem. But so in organizations, well, things we do right. The targeting it was not easy, but we are just having the more like 99% of our families we can get the cash, we can give the cash for them, so we are doing well. We have some we always want to have 100%, but I think 95% is good. Also that Ulysses Ben is very cool. It's very good that we can have those social register, and it's like Sam said, it's not only the survey but also the observation data. I think it's very good for the organizations to implement, and I think that's all that I can say.
That's incredible. Yeah, over 90% penetration is pretty remarkable. Yeah. Miriam?
Great, thank you, Anya. A minute to toot our horn. So I think one thing that we do, I mean, if we do well as Give Directly, is giving recipients the ability to have agency over what they use their money for, 100% agency, and to determine the outcomes on their own. We don't tell them what outcomes we're interested in. We let everyone determine their own outcomes. And I think that is one thing that I love about Give Directly. And I think it's something that I hope everyone will be able to do within their available capacity. Thank you.
That's phenomenal. Thank you. Sam?
So I think that one thing that PXD does really well is having really rapid feedback loops from what we're doing to how we can improve it, and then how we can continue to improve it. And I think this is something that we're privileged to be able to do because we have staff, including researchers and others who are connected to the research community, who are also inextricably linked to our operations staff and working sort of in concert with and as often the main drivers of implementing our programs. But I think we could share a lot about collaborating with external researchers as well, in order to make these feedback loops really par for the course for other organizations.
Thank you so much. That's time for our panel. Thank you so much to Juan and Miriam and Sam who joined us to talk today. Juan, again, thank you so much for joining us and being a good sport. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to hand it over to Josh for some closing remarks for Evidence to Action.
Great. Thank you, Anya. And thank you so much to the panelists. That was really fantastic to hear about where the rubber really meets the road and some of the issues and priorities for all of your organizations, and the fantastic work that you're all doing. So that was great. I think just reflecting on the last few hours, today we've heard really exciting updates and results from researchers and implementers thinking about this question of reimagining development aid, and in particular this question related to who should get resources and when and how. Hopefully people that have tuned into all or parts of this symposium have gotten a sense for the global significance of these challenges and the importance of new approaches to these challenges. They affect not only the distribution of literally trillions of dollars in cash aid, affecting billions of the world's poorest, but also the design of job training programs, graduation programs, food transfer subsidies, and even community-based development. And so it should also be clear that while most governments and NGOs need to think carefully about these targeting questions, the research on targeting and on how to best deliver and provide aid is still relatively niche and underfunded. I think this is a fantastic time to think about how to crowd in research and innovation in this space, given like the outsized ratio of the importance of the questions to the amount of funding that's being invested in thinking about those questions. As I mentioned in my opening remarks with that quote from the New York Times, we have, again, literally billions of dollars being devoted towards optimizations in targeting. It's just that they're optimizing the targeting of ads and the placement of products rather than the targeting of aid and the design of social services. So I think this is an area that hopefully everyone here is interested in supporting. It's certainly an area that SIGA is interested in helping to incubate and further support. We have some initiatives already. So at the beginning of the COVID pandemic last year, we launched the Targeting Aid Better initiative. And we're looking in early 2022, fingers crossed, to also launch an initiative related to data privacy in low and middle income countries, which is a theme that came up in a lot of the conversations today as well. But of course, we see those two small efforts as really just the seeds of a much broader and important research agenda. And we're constantly looking for partners, both from implementing organizations working on the front lines of aid and delivery, like the three we just heard from, as well as researchers, sort of SIGA's core competence, and also individuals and organizations that are interested in investing in these programs and these basic research initiatives to help answer questions about how to deliver aid better. So, I felt privileged to be a part of today's conversation, and really this is just one piece of a much longer conversation that will continue into the future. I will wrap my remarks up there and hand it over to Carson, our executive director, to give a few final remarks. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Big thanks again to all of our speakers. Of course, this is just a quick snapshot of the great work that's happening across the SIGA network and beyond. And kudos especially to the researchers who we forced to take hour-long presentations and squish them into very short 15 to 10 minute teaser, 10 to 15 minute teaser talks. And also I want to say thanks to the SIGA team, especially Anya Marchenko and Iman, and also to you, Josh, for pulling together this event. I'm just going to imagine that the audience is giving you a standing ovation right now, along with the speakers. So of course, we could never do the work that we do at SIGA without a very committed network of donors and partners. If you're interested in ABLE, please consider supporting SIGA research by going to our homepage and clicking Support Us, which is the orange button that floats around. I'm going to put a slide up here so you can see our website and our contact information. Please also stay in touch with us. Make sure that if you don't already, that you subscribe to our mailing list, where you'll get lots of like monthly updates on cool work that's happening across the SIGA network. You can also subscribe to newsletters that are specific to, for example, our targeting initiative or financial inclusion or agriculture, health, whatever it is that you're interested in. So you just enter your email address at the bottom of our homepage. And of course, thank you so much to our audience, to all of you for joining us. I hope you all have a good rest of the day and rest of the week. So we'll leave this slide up just for a few minutes, but thanks again and see you later.